Dear colleagues, I'll try to fit within this schedule and I will read. Before I begin, let me thank the administration of the State Museum of Arts for the invitation to this conference. And I'd like to share some discoveries made in the archives that we made while preparing the Shchukin biography of a collection exhibition. At first, I want to thank the senior researcher of the Moscow Ceramics Museum, Svetlana Yurkova, who just made a remark, and the staff of the manuscripts department and of the inventory department of your museum, and of course I'd like to remember Alexandra Andreevna Demskaya, who many years ago compiled a collection of Shchukin's documents in the manuscript department of the Pushkin Museum, and Natalia Alexandrova told us this story yesterday. I should note that our museum didn't expect to be called upon before the preparation of this exhibition. Probably the reason was the document of the commandant of the Kremlin, Malkov, which was presented by Alexei Petukhov yesterday, because they asked for furniture which used to belong to Sergei Shchukin. But the Kremlin, of course, had taken the furniture and we didn't have it in our museum anymore, but we still had unique decorative and applied arts pieces from Dmitry Shchukin's collection. In the 1920s, when the collection of your museum was being shaped, the contacts between different museums were very close. Only in 1925, the Museum of Fine Arts received from the Kremlin palaces about 127 items. These were paintings by Western masters, engravings, miniatures, bronze, ancient Egyptian articles. These were things selected by Nikolai Romanov from the Kremlin funds, or that were specifically searched for by Dmitry Ivanov in the state funds for the museums. Back then, different museums worked together in order to rescue the treasures. The staff communicated, shared the information, and did everything they could to save the art from revolutionary sales and destruction. At that time, the armory received 4 articles that are today present in the exhibition of Shchukin's collection. Two of them definitely, yes, here they are. So 2 of them definitely belong to Dmitry Shchukin, which is known from the inventory of the armory, but 2 other articles, the embroidered icons of the 15th century that came later, only have proof of their being the part of this collection in some papers that were given together with them, but these papers were a surprise. When the armory asked to receive these articles, they said they had belonged to the Shchukin's collection. And in their response, with the agreement to transfer them, said that they had belonged to Prince Sherbatov. The act of transfer doesn't state whom they belong to at all. The unpacking act of Dmitry Shchukin's collection, discovered in the Museum of Ceramics, these items were listed among 10 icons that were added extra. Let us suggest them for your exhibition, but we were hesitant Unfortunately, we still don't know whether they belong to Dmitry Shchukin, and during the exhibition's work, we researched the archives, and the results we are now showing here. When these articles were received in the armory in the 1927, when the Museum of Fine Arts was receiving the collections of decorative and applied arts from Dmitry Shchukin's collection from the Museum of Old Western Paintings, the commission, looking at the boxes with porcelain and bronze, having opened some of them in the Museum of Fine Arts, discovered that the collection was packed not only without any kind of system, but in the same boxes, fragile ceramics was laid alongside bronze items. So the commission didn't want to repack the fragile articles and decided to take all the 15 boxes to the Museum of Porcelain in order to take out all the bronze and leave it in the Museum of Fine Arts. The Museum of Porcelain wasn't in Kuskovo back then. It was placed in Vidensky, later Podsosensky Lane, and it was a branch of the Armory Chamber. In a letter dated 15 January from the Museum of Fine Arts, we read that 15 boxes with porcelain from the former collection of Dmitry Shchukin are being sent to be examined, and the material contained within should have been distributed. The commission looked at the boxes. There is an act about this, and it turned out that inside there was porcelain of the West and the East, faience, maiolic and terracotta, Italian bronze, enamels, marble, as well as Russian icons from the unboxed articles that were not listed in the inventory. Those were, I quote, 10 icons of the 15th to 18th centuries, including 2 old embroidered icons depicting the Virgin and Saint Demetrius, which were later given to the Armory Chamber. The letter dated 21st March of 1927, the head of the Armory, Ivanov, asks the head of the Museum of Porcelain about the transfer of 2 animal pieces and 2 embroidered pieces from Shchukin's collection to the Armory Chamber. The 2 animals were received according to the act of the 28th of March, but the embroidered pieces, at the decision of the commission that was dealing with unpacking the boxes that contained former Shchukin's articles, have already been returned together with the bronze to the Fine Arts Museum. Then Dmitry Ivanov wrote a letter to Nikolai Romanov on the 29th of March, where he writes, the articles that were placed in the Museum of Porcelain as part of Dmitry Shchukin's collection and now returned to the Museum of Fine Arts are 2 articles of ancient Russian embroidery, which specialists claim has named to be really suitable for the armory, because these examples are not present there. That is why I'm asking if these articles are not necessary for the exhibition of the Museum of Fine Arts, for them to be transferred to the Armory Chamber, which would be sufficient for the armory. So the next day, Dmitry Dmitrich went to the People's Commissariat of Enlightenment to receive the to receive the support, and the museums transferred the pieces. We have an act, but this no longer stated that these items used to belong to a certain collection. And in the written response that preceded the act from the Museum of Fine Arts to the Armory, these things are attributed not to the collection of Shchukin, but to another collector, Prince Sergei Sherbatov, who had left Russia, contrary to Dmitry Shchukin.
In the memo, we read, the museum does not object to transfer of these items to the Armory if the ministry does not oppose this, and we are ready to transfer the 2 embroideries from the former Sherbatov collection. Is this a technical error, or it was a deliberate redaction? Was unclear, and we tried to ascertain this, and we went to the State Archive in order to learn whether ancient Russian embroidery were kept in the Dmitry Shchukin Museum as part of the churchly inventory. And in the museum department of the People's Commissariat did have some documents on the initial Shchukin collection. Besides the 127 paintings, the Dmitry Shchukin Museum featured furniture, stained glass, marbles, stone carvings, bronzes, clocks, 268 items of porcelain and other ceramics, animals and woodcuts, 606 items all in all. The contemporary reviews say that this collection was organically built. The head of the museum department of the People's Commissariat of Enlightenment, Trotskaya, wrote to the Dmitry Shchukin Museum, still called that way, not the Old Western Art Museum. So she wrote to the Dmitry Shchukin Museum asking them to provide a full inventory of artworks at the museum using standard forms in 2 copies. This inventory was found by us at the archive, and it was written by Shchukin himself in late 1918. It mentions 2 copper bowls with animal, among others. This inventory was checked and issued to the museum next year. Judging by the stamp of the People's Commissariat, so it means that this inventory worked as a preservation document and later on used in the 20s to lend this artwork for exhibition, and it does not feature any ancient Russian embroidery whatsoever or any other items of religious use. The Shchukin collection, housed in the Starokonyushina Lane, house number 35, had a tragic fate. This collection was bequeathed by Dmitry Shchukin to the Rumyantsev Museum, along with sufficient funds for its maintenance. But after the revolution, it was opened as a public museum, firstly under the auspices of the Moscow Council of Deputies, or the Moscow Soviet, and then as part of the People's Commissariat for Enlightenment as the Museum of Old Western Painting, and the former owner and the creator of the museum, Dmitry Shchukin, kept living in his house and caring about the collection. However, the first years of the Soviet period were years of constant struggle for this museum. In late 1918, when the social work department wanted this building for themselves, the Museum Foundation advised the museum department to protect the Shchukin collection from any violations. And in their documents they wrote that the collection of Dmitry Ivanovich Shchukin is one of the best collections of Old Western paintings. The Commissariat Commission believed that this collection could be seen as second in Russia only after the Hermitage. Another point that they made was the library, which was built thanks to Shchukin's deep knowledge of art and his subtle taste, and the library matched the collection and featured books on almost every artwork in the collection. Next year, 1919, the museum was facing the threat of eviction once again. The museum department of the People's Commissariat discussed the question of complete dissolution of this collection, with the rooms being transferred to the state. However, the department decided to protect the collection, and they managed to do this until 1921. In 1921, in the summer, the issues of location and housing in Moscow grew even more urgent, and even the museum department was evicted from its rooms. And so, in the autumn of 1921, the Central Executive Committee transferred the rooms of the Old Western Museum to the American Relief Administration, which took this house. The museum stayed at the same building, but they were literally physically opposing the other organization here. And in the Rumyantsev Museum documents from the 1922 mention this in a brief but a very telling phrase. The whole museum's collections are currently housed in 5 rooms of the previous Shchukin flat, of the former Shchukin's flat, at the very first floor, the ground floor of the house. But in these 5 rooms, as in the other rooms of the former flat, people from the relief administration staff are living with their beds and personal effects, together with the assistant curator and the relief administration agent. Due to the fact that people are housed in the room, the paintings are taken from the lower parts of the walls and hung above, or put in a special corner, stacked together, covered with a piece of cloth. With the coming of the relief administration, the museum was closed for the public. On the first floor of the same house, 9 people were housed in the same flat, together with the former owner of the house. In the remaining rooms, the kitchen was placed together with the junior staff of the museum and the relief administration. They were all hoping that this would be really resolved soon, but next year the Rumyantsev Museum Commission created an inventory of the whole collection, but the collection remained at the same rooms for 1 more year. Once again, there were no items of churchly use in the inventory. In 1923, when the American Relief Administration was evicted from Russia, the museum was not able to regain its rooms, and on the 4th of October same year, the museum department of the Science Directorate resolved that all the items of the collection need to be brought to 2 rooms of the former flat And while the painting collection of Dmitry Shchukin, 127 items, became the keystone of the painting collection of the Fine Arts Museum, as Lunacharsky put this, and it was transferred to the renovated building on Volkhonka. However, the 479 items of decorative art, museum-grade collections, as they mentioned in the documents, had to wait for 3 more years, and in 1927 they ended up in the Porcelain Museum for future distribution and classification. The full list of items is still to be researched, and finding them across contemporary museums is still an unsolved issue. But currently we will focus on these 2 embroideries that were put into these transport cases outside of the inventory, and they were found by Vladimir Klein and then got transferred to the armory thanks to the efforts of Dmitry Ivanov. Why did the memo mention them as belonging to Shchukin, and the reply memo mentioned them as belonging to the Sherbatov collection? In the Shchukin collection documents we could not find the answer, and then we turned to the Sherbatov archive and found an unknown letter sent from the city of Yalta on the 15th of December 1917 to Nikolai Ilyich Romanov. This letter was written in the turmoil of the first months after the revolution, and it mentions the religious icons that were given over to the Ruvyantsev Museum together with the paintings, and this gives us a clue to this mystery. I quote the letter. Esteemed Nikolai Ilyich, you were so kind to accept my paintings and icons in the place where you in the place that you mentioned in your letter. However, I have mislaid your letter when I was fleeing the countryside, and I don't have it with me. However, I am unable to come to Moscow, and I don't have any document pertaining to my things kept at the museum, and so I beg you to let an inventory be made of my items kept at the museum using the official stamps and official forms of the museum, or your signature to verify it. This document that lists these things as mine with their number is absolutely necessary for me in this tumultuous time. If something leaves the museum and we would need to take extra care, and if the museum becomes the subject of political repressions, I would ask you to save 3 items which I care about the most, and he mentions works by Wrubel and Renoir, especially The Girl in the Pinafore, which Alexei Petukhov showed us yesterday on a photo, and he ends this letter with despairing words: our art is dying, our museums are dying, all institutions are dying, this is all going to live through some horrible times. Whether Nikolai Romanov was able to make this inventory for Prince Sherbatov, we don't know. But in a document from 1921 on the examination of transport cases with artworks left by private people for preservation at the Rumyantsev Museum, we found a crate with number 9 in the inventory, holding 11 icons, 2 of them embroidered from the Sherbatov collection. we are left to suggest that this crate from the Sharbatov collection, accidentally or deliberately, but certainly with the knowledge of Nikolai Romanov, became part of the 15 crates of the Shchukin collection, and that's how they ended up in the same inventory. It means that the ancient Russian embroideries that we have at this exhibition stem from the Sharbatov collection. However, the exhibition has given us an opportunity to study the fates of this collection more and to get a palpable sense of how close to the edge these great artworks ended up in this tumultuous time and how they were saved by our predecessors. Thank you.